If you're one of the folks that puts their long-range weather forecasting stock into large rodents, yesterday was a pretty big day. Nothing against Punxsutawney Phil, but we humans have a slightly more scientific approach to predicting what the end of winter may look like. I'm going to show you some of our tools of the trade in this week's Heather's Weather Wise. Pennsylvania's most famous groundhog continued on his 134-year tradition yesterday when he was summoned from his little den to make his famous annual prognostication. In case you missed it yesterday, Punxsutawney Phil did indeed see his shadow, and according to him, that means 6 more weeks of winter. Now, I've got to give Phil some props for simplicity. I mean, making an entire season forecast based on how the light happens to hit you one day sounds like a pretty good gig. Of course, we humans have made things a little bit more complicated. Over the last few decades, dedicated scientists of all sorts have studied our atmosphere and observed some of its major patterns. A few of those patterns, which we call teleconnections, have proven to be pretty useful in figuring out what could come our way in the next 2 weeks, month, even the next season. When it comes to the winter season, there's a couple of these teleconnections that really stand out as being a little bit more reliable. One of them is called the North Atlantic Oscillation, or NAO for short. What it does is look at the relationship between a semi-permanent area of low pressure near Greenland and a semi-permanent area of high pressure over the central Atlantic. Now, if both of these two systems are on the weaker side, the pressure difference between them is relatively low. In that case, the NAO is said to be on the negative side, meaning there's that smaller pressure difference, a weaker jet stream, and a higher potential for cold air to blast its way southward because of the weaker jet stream. There's a similar idea that can be applied in the Arctic Circle. It's called the Arctic Oscillation, or AO for short. If you want a quiet winter season with very few long-lived cold spells, you want this index to be on the positive side. That means we've got a really strong core of low pressure over the poles and stronger areas of high pressure at mid-latitudes closer to where we are. That larger pressure difference means the jet stream is stronger and it's better able to lock that cold air up into the poles, preventing it from dropping south. By the way, that strong low up near the pole, yeah, that's our old friend the polar vortex. Both the NAO and the AO can be used to predict how the polar vortex, which technically resides in the stratosphere, may present itself down at the surface. Now, a negative NAO, a negative AO, or a combination of both would signal the potential for a weakening of the winds around the polar vortex, meaning some areas of cold air have a better shot of punching their way southward and hanging out for quite a long time. What's interesting is that both have indeed been negative for a few weeks now, but we've only just started to see the shots of colder air coming through. A couple of weeks ago, scientists observed a weakening and so-called splitting of the polar vortex. That means the second half of winter is more likely to continue to bring shots of cold air southward. I feel like I've just spent the last couple of minutes throwing a lot of geek speak at you, so I'll put it in Phil's terms. I'm seeing my shadow. I'm thinking we've got 6 more weeks of winter, but of course, whether or not the atmospheric patterns actually work out, there's always 6 weeks between Groundhog Day and the start of astronomical spring. Go figure, right? That's it for this week's Heather's Weather Wise. I'll see you next week with a new topic, but until then, remember it's good to be a geek.